You bring back many memories there. I once asked Peter Solway a question about what was happening in Durham, Newcastle when he was a student there in the 50s. And he said, well, you know, one day R.P. Wright came to me and said, I'm sorry I haven't taught you before, but you always sat with the other lot. Tatiana, thank you very much for inviting me to be the token male this afternoon. It's very kind of you. I am delighted to be here. I'm not only written about Elizabeth, but I have written about Brenda. And this book is for sale for a tenner at the back to Fiona. And the money goes to the society. And it's a good read. Not by me. I'm delighted to speak about Elizabeth, who is one of my heroines. And also, I may say, I'm delighted to speak about her because she is a very distant relative of mine. You have to go back to a marriage in 1617 to get the link, but it's still there. Okay. A word about Elizabeth Hodgson. Background quickly. She was born in 1855 in Cambridge. Her father was master of Peterhouse College. Her maternal grandfather was master of Pembroke College. But they both came from the northwest of England, and her father had the distinction of having William Wordsworth as his godfather. So in two ways, this is really important background, Cambridge and the northwest of England. She went to school, a boarding school in Brighton. The building's still there, I've seen it. It's a lot of proprietary schools, as they were called, in Brighton, when she was 16. That's only because she's in the census, and I then lose track of her for a time, but we'll come back to that. A word about what was happening on Hadrian's Wall at the time. So what we're looking at here is this man on the John Conway of Bruce on the 1886 pilgrimage, the second pilgrimage of Hadrian's Wall. He'd founded the first in 1849. He was for 40 years king of the wall. It was impossible to contradict him, picking up from Francis. When the changes came, they didn't come from the northeast. They came from Oxford, they came from Glasgow, and they came from Berlin, because you couldn't contradict Bruce or challenging him, let's say, on his own territory in Newcastle. But as it happened, the very year of his death, by chance, the world changed, and a new era began on Hadrian's Wall. But I don't want to talk about that. I just want to make the point that this was the most incredible decade. These circles, or ellipses or whatever, are where in the 1890s Roman frontier archaeology started with great fizz. On the Antonine Wall, 1890s, and the Society of Antiquities of Scotland, same decade, Hadrian's Wall, Dumfries and Galloway digging Birrens, and then across on the continent, Utrecht, in the Netherlands. 1892, Mommsen founded the Rijkslimescommission, and Austria followed. It was an incredible time, and this is the change that had happened after Bruce's death, and this is the world that Haverfield came into and brought in with him Elizabeth Hodgson. To take a step back from Haverfield too, in 1840, this man, John Hodgson, looked at Hadrian's Wall and the evidence for it, dating. He had inscriptions, bottom left. He had literary references, which for the last 300 years, the xenophobic English had never really believed, because when books started to become available after the printing press, the wall was studied by a Scotsman, Hector Buis, and an Italian, Polydor Virgil, who was also had the double distinction of being a Roman Catholic. So we're not going to believe it, whatever he said. And they got it right. Hadrian built the wall. But the English wouldn't accept that. So it wasn't until 1840 that John Hodgson got his head round it and definitely proved that Hadrian's Wall was Hadrian's Wall. And more than that, he looked at the wall and in its various elements, the wall, the mountcastles, the turrets, the forts, and the vallum, and he said they're all part of the same scheme. So there were two really important steps forward at that time. Haverfield, in the early 1890s, started looking at Hadrian's Wall. He reviewed the evidence of John Hodgson and just really confirmed it. But he realized that the evidence that we had related to the wall itself, the stone-built structures. And therefore, he couldn't fit the vallum, that great earthwork behind the wall to the right here. He couldn't fit that in the sequence because there were no inscriptions from it, no relationship stratigraphically between it and the wall. So he set out, through excavation, as you see here, that's him standing at the back, he set out to try to demonstrate how the vallum fitted in to the story of Hadrian's Wall. So he started his excavations in 1894, and they ran on for 10 years till 1903. Published annually in the Transactions of the Cumberland Westmoreland Antiquarian and Archaeological Society. If your society's got a name as long as that, by Jove, you're going well. And he went in, he acquired the help of two local people. One was Thomas Hesketh Hodgson, president of that society, and the other was his wife, who was Elizabeth, and they lived at Newby Grange. It's now a golf course. They had, one of the things I take great delight in studying family history is how many servants people had, because it tells you about how well off they are. They had 5 live-in servants. I don't know anything about the coachman or anybody in the gardeners. 5 live-in servants. She was brought up in a household with a mere 2 live-in servants. But when she married the very well off Thomas Hesketh Hodgson, this is what she moved into. Her father died young in the 1870s. Her mother remarried 4 years later, said Thomas Hodgson here, and she entered into, her stepfather was another Cambridge alumnus. I mean, this is a solid Cambridge family, and already with 9 children, and a local vicar, also very much from the north-west of England, father being canon of Carlisle Cathedral. And they formed the backup team for Haverfield's excavations. Thomas and Haverfield was very grateful to them. Whenever he writes about them, it's in grateful thanks. Thomas surveyed the sites of the trenches, recorded their locations, tied them into the Ordnance Survey, while Elizabeth drew the sections. So this is Thomas Hesketh Hodgson's drawings, later improved, we'll come back to behind that, for publication. And he's got the position of the trenches marked. You can see it more clearly on this, Bird Oswald, where they're tracing, Haverfield's tracing the vallum through this series of trenches, tracing the vallum going round the south side of the fort. And Elizabeth drew sections and later painted them. Her obituary states that she was an accomplished watercolorist. So that's presumably beforehand, before the excavations. So she was drawing these sections across the vallum, as you can see, as a result of Haverfield's excavations. So this was a period of work, but it divides itself into 2 distinct parts. the man with this wonderful name of Cadwallader Bates prophesied in 1895 that beneath Hadrian's stone wall there was a turf wall. And Haverfield's second season of excavation was coming up. So he managed to persuade Haverfield to excavate in this section of Hadrian's wall where the stone wall and the turf wall are separate. And Cadwallader Bates came to see the excavation, and he looked at the section and he said, oh, okay, that's a turf wall. And Haverfield said, no, it's not. And his workmen said, no, it's not. So it took Cadwallader Bates 3 or 4 pressures leading to 3 or 4 excavations by Haverfield to actually prove that this was the turf wall. And here it is. These are the earliest drawings of a turf rampart across a Roman frontier. At the same time, the Scots were doing the same on the Antonine Wall, and recently a letter's come to light, believe it or not, from the man who was involved in the work, George Nielsen, to John Conrick of Bruce, saying, we've put a section across the Antonine Wall, we've got all this turf wall, but we don't know how to photograph it. Can you please tell us how to photograph it? These were very early days of trying to record turf ramparts. But Elizabeth got it right. So here are her sections across the turf wall. Now, sorry, just let me check. So what then happened is she published those in Haverfield's next report, but thereafter there's not a single one of her coloured watercolours in any of his remaining 8 reports. There's nothing specifically stated as to why this should be. She kept drawing the sections, but they were all published in black and white, in line drawings, and her husband kept recording the location of the trenches. So, cutting a long story short, because I know you've got a glass of wine coming up, I think that what happened, and this is a guess, that there's no way that Elizabeth could not have been on the site when the turf wall was found, because she drew it. And she saw what was happening, that Haverfield, she had no excavation experience, neither did Haverfield. She could see that he didn't understand, but she did. And that was the crucial point, I think. She could see what had been found, she understood the importance of it, she drew it, she could draw it, and Haverfield, it took so much pressure to dig and dig and dig because he just didn't believe what he was looking at. And that was the moment Elizabeth had had enough. I've only got 1 or 2 to go, but I wanted to show you this. Tatiana's kindly put out the top version, which is Elizabeth's own drawing of an incredibly important section across the wall ditch underneath the fort at Chester's. And you can see the outline of the ditch. You can see that they only bottomed it in the middle. They've got her layers. This wasn't published. Haverfield started in 1894. This was 1900, so we're 6 seasons on. But he didn't publish the coloured drawing. What he did, he redrew it. I don't know who redrew it. He does talk about having a surveyor. It may have been him, but just compare the top one and the awfulness of the middle one. And then he drew it again. He published in Cumberland Westman, and he published in Proceedings of the Society of Antiquaries in Newcastle. So he ended up with 2 drawings. But I mean, if you look at the brown there, and we've got this sort of broken earth and so on, and the layers are not the same, even drawn correctly. And I think this must tell us quite a lot about not just Haverfield's ability as an archaeologist, but also what's behind this seeming falling out. The Hodgsons were very polite people. They didn't withdraw their support. They carried on. It was just at a lower level. One of the points of discussion behind this afternoon is why so many of these people fell from, the women, I beg your pardon, fell from public knowledge. It could be, it's too glib, I think, to say, well, she was a woman. I think she was a very, as so many have said, she was a powerful woman in her own right. She chaired the Cumberland Westmoreland Excavation Committee, even into her 70s. She was respected at the time because of her previous work, but gradually things slipped away. One of her friends, this man, John Patterson Gibson, died in 1913. That was a break with the past. The new men on the block after the war were indeed all men. And they formed quite a group. I mean, John Charlton, Eric Burley, a student I don't know, I can't remember the name offhand, F.G. Simpson, another student, Kirk Strada, Shimon Applebaum, and Robin Collingwood, and the photograph was taken by Ian Richmond, who you see. It's not that they were particularly against her. Simpson worked on the vallum as Elizabeth had done, but it was just, it was as if she was fading from memory, and they wanted to put their own views forward. One of the reasons why I've got great respect for her, Ian Richmond dug two, this is just before the war, 39. Can you remember the date, Matt? I can't. It's 39, I think. 2 sections across Hadrian's Wall. And he decided this was the perfect section. This is what Hadrian's Wall was like. Top bomb, Cock Mountain Hill. That was it. On the basis of one section which didn't work out, one section that did. And you look in every book, including mine, and they will give you Richmond's dimensions for the vallum, ditch, berms, the mounds on each side, based upon his one excavation. This is Elizabeth. Admittedly, these aren't excavations, but what they are transects at ground level across the vallum. And she produced her own reports with measurements given in detail of the vallum, demonstrating it wasn't simple. There wasn't a one stereotype version. The vallum, as she points out, the only thing about the vallum is that the people who constructed it only cared for the ditch. The rest they messed around with. Whereas Richmond, in my view, closed down the discussion. This is the view. And it still is the view in publications. I was stupid enough to reproduce his section in the handbook 20 years ago. Whereas Elizabeth Hodgson said it's not like that. It's very different. We've got to explain why we have all these variations. And so she's opening up a discussion. And here's unpublished, well, some of the unpublished drawings. 5 years ago, I think, the Cumberland Westmoreland Society went on a tour to the new Society of Antiquaries of London, and the librarian very kindly got out for us something which neither the archivist or I had ever seen before. 15 drawings, of which you've been looking at some, and a statement of what they were, why they were being given, because Cumberland and Westmoreland didn't have an archive, so the Hodgsons were giving them in 1910 all these drawings prepared for the occasion to the London Antiquaries. They were there, popped in the library, and disappeared from view themselves for so long. They included not just the vallum, because work was done at Bad Oswald. This was Elizabeth's drawing of Bad Oswald, and I like to put this on because of the little hand at the right-hand side in red. showing you where the section was drawn. And it was accompanied by a letter from Thomas Hesketh Hodgson of Newby Grange, writing in a separate parcel, a series of large-scale drawings and sections illustrating the excavations carried out by Professor Haverfield at the date. And so they're there. Commonwealth Westminster Society produced money to digitize them, so they're now available online, where you can see very clearly, and through Tatiana's excellent work, we have drawings here and upstairs. Are we going upstairs afterwards? Yes, to see them up there as well. So that's Elizabeth Hodgson. Her daughter, who you've already seen, Kate, Catherine Sophia, named after her Hesketh grandmother, who was something like my sixth cousin, half removed, is here. Her daughter became president of the Society of Commonwealth Westmoreland, and is pictured in Tatiana's photographs, which she's laid out for our inspection. So here she is in the centre with President of Commonwealth Westmoreland, President of Newcastle Antiquaries, at the very first Congress of Roman Frontier Studies in 1949. The lady who succeeded her in studying the vallum in detail is Brenda Hayward. And here she is, slip of a girl, walked the whole length of the wall of the vallum in 1950, recorded it, undertook excavations to try to understand it better, and is the subject of this book. Thank you very much.